in your head that you can just grab them and
Mhm.
recite them to yourself, and it's like, aha, here is an instance where that makes sense. Now that all fits, ties together. It's
Yeah, oh
beautiful.
yeah. Did you ever have, so you were talking about Penske's and how you declined the offer to work in New Jersey because that wasn't where you're being called to work.
Well, that's not where I wanted to go.
Mhm.
All right. Well, first of all, I was already in Reading, and I knew that eventually everybody in New Jersey that's going to stay with the company was going to come over to Pennsylvania anyway. And so, I didn't want to, and it's a good thing I said what I said, because I probably would have been out of my sweet spot.
Mhm.
I'd have been in over my head, because I wasn't ready to be a vice president with these other guys and have these multi-$100,000 houses and living on an acre of property and blah blah, and having these parties for people. Mom and I just aren't like that.
Mhm.
We don't live for other to show off and be fancy for other people. We live for ourselves. And so to because so when I was asked you know um, about my future, I said, yeah, as long as I don't have to go to New Jersey, I'm fine.
Mhm.
And Mr. Penske, I think he laughed quietly to himself, because he thought, well, okay, that gives me my answer, right? And then I just got more and more responsibilities in Pennsylvania, and it all worked out perfectly. And then after I worked at the admin center for a certain amount of time, I was getting kind of tired of it. Then I went over to corporate, which was in Green Hills. So that's like, what, 10 minutes away? It's beautiful. So I worked over there for a while. I got involved in business planning. One of the people that was in business planning, it was a girl. And they all have their MBAs, right? They're all very smart and they know what they're doing. But she would make silly, stupid mistakes. And so now she reported to me, and I reported to the vice president. And he said to me, it's time to, get some information and do her review, her annual review. And so what I would do is I would take a piece of paper and this I learned, this is a carry forward from my goal setting workshops that I studied when I was still back as an auditor. And I would put a description of the problem up top, that's something that had to be solved. And then I would list some of the things that would help you solve it. And like, these are the people you can talk to, these are the tools you can use, and then this is your timetable, bump through these steps, and then boom, you come down to the end. And this is how you work through a problem. It's like how to eat an elephant, one bite at a time, right? Take the small steps. But the key was, and you've heard this before, take a small step, but do something now. Take an action step. Like, look up a phone number that you're going to call later today, right? And then you make that call. And when you make that call, you set that appointment. Now you've got an appointment. Now you're going to go out and see him. And when you're going to go out and see him, you're going to prepare whatever it is you need to take with you. Now you're going to have more information. You're going to see the person. You're going to develop a game plan. And slowly the whole thing takes along almost like a life of its own. And before you know it, you've accomplished that goal, which before you thought was out there, just like, I don't even want to touch that, So now you got tuck that in under your belt. You got that one solved, right? So anyway, it was real good because I was doing those kind of things. I really enjoyed it, and I forget where I was going to that one, but it's good stuff.
It's beautiful. You're telling me the lady at Penske, you were giving her.
Yes, that's right. And so I would give her an assignment. I'd say, do such and such and so with this information. So we had information on the company, and she was supposed to, I don't know, break it down and do this or do that or whatever. So then I would get the results from her. I'd look it over, and sure enough, I'd find a mistake, because she had to have it rushing through it too fast. And then so sometimes she would get misdirected, or she would forget a piece or something. And so I would write that down in the results thing. And then when I'd go back to her, I'd say to her, okay, here's what I asked you to do. and she had a copy of that part of the paper. Here's what you did. I said, but what you did didn't include this, right? Which was implied in this other stuff or whatever. And I said, do you see how you need to do this? She says, yes, okay, I see how I need to do that, all right. So I said, slow down and, pay attention to all the detail and you'll do great. You're great at this stuff. Just give yourself a chance to do it right.
Mm-hmm.
And then she would do that and go off and then anyway, I'd file that away. And then the next project came up and the same thing happened and the same thing happened and the same thing happened. So I had 3 or 4 or maybe even 5 incidents like that. They weren't big things, but they were things, if I wasn't watching her, she would not have completed it in a manner prepared to hand it off to senior management. And that's what we're trying to do with her. That's where we're trying to get her. So she could be and I'll tell you, she worked hard and fast and she was good at what she did. She just didn't see the big picture and tended to miss little details. And so that's what I was doing. And my boss, he was over the moon when he saw me document and talk to all that, because then we did her review together. And we talked about all that stuff. And those are the kinds of things he was trying to tell her before I got there and wasn't able to.
Wow.
So it was like, ching, I made a success there. And so I would record that in my log. I had a notebook, spiral notebook, and from the very first day I started there, everything good that happened, I wrote down something about that. Like, I mentioned such and so to him, he was pleased with this, blah, blah, blah. And I'll now be doing such and so and whatever. And basically I was writing affirmations for each day. And each day for like the first 2 weeks, when I went in, the first thing I would do is read through them. And it would build my confidence and stuff. And I was given also, you may want to cut this into a separate one later, but I was given also the task of new business development. And so I was in the business planning process. So I sat in all the review meetings with all the big guys, and they would have the vice presidents from each area around the country come in, talk to our president, and discuss their plans for the next coming year. This was in October, and that would be from January to the next December. And they would say this and this and this and this, and sometimes they would say their competition. They would have local competition, and this guy, he has a good business, and if he ever wanted to sell, we'd like to buy his business, or like we'd like to grab some of those customers, right? So my job was to make a phone call to that person in charge of that company. So I would go down to the credit department and find out who the principals are at the company, and like who the president was, and if there's a senior president or an owner or whatever the case may be. I'd find that person's name, I'd get his number, and then I would make a phone call to him, right? And it was kind of funny because I viewed myself as this little peon guy calling this very important guy who's running this company that had, I don't know, maybe 50 customers and 200 trucks and all that kind of stuff. And I would call, and when they picked up the phone, they'd say, "Who's calling?" And I would say, "Hi, I'm Martin LeClaire, and I'm the business manager with Penske Truck Leasing. I'd like to speak with," and then I'd name the person, right? And they'd say, "Hold on." And 9 times out of 10, when the person heard that somebody who they didn't know who he was from Penske Truck Leasing is calling for the president, he was curious. He said, "I want to see what this guy has to say. What's going on?" And so they pick up the phone, and I would introduce myself. I said, "First of all, I want to say that we're very impressed with the business you have there. I'm in charge of business and development, and we're having our annual meetings right now, and we're talking over business strategies for the next month. And in the conversations, your name came up, and we are really impressed with what you're doing there. And I was told to reach out to you and say that if you ever thought about selling your business, we'd like to be considered. you know, because we really respect what you're doing there. And some guys would say, oh, that's great, I appreciate that very much, but if I'm ever interested, I'll call you, don't worry about it. Okay, I'd hang up from that phone call, and in my mind, on my paper, I'd scratch them off and I'd say to myself, thank you for the 10 trucks. Because
Oh,
I knew eventually one of them would hit and I would get all my
that's
my
cool.
payback. And then sometimes one guy in particular, only one time, he was very, very snotty. He was really full of himself. And he said to me, he says, well, you tell Mr. Penske when he's ready to sell, I'm ready to buy him out. And I said, well, thank you for your business, you know, and moved on to that one. But I would probably make 3 or 4 calls, and one of the guys would say, you know, and basically we're offering to evaluate their business for them and make an offer. And so, you know, it's no obligation. And so about, you know, every 3rd or 4th guy would say, sure, make me an offer. I'm kind of interested what you think, you know.
Mhm.
So I would say, okay. And then I would start getting some information. And now, then everybody started doing things. We started sending each other information across the net. We got listing of their vehicles, the age. We would develop a maintenance schedule so we knew how much. Basically, we figured out how much we would have to invest in that business to bring it into ours and how profitable it would be.
Mhm.
And based on all that, we had a price we could offer. Sometimes it was good, sometimes it wasn't. But, you know, in either case, I was doing my job, and I couldn't believe it was with God's help that it
Amen.
was actually happening. So
Mhm.
that was really cool. I enjoyed it.
Amen.